Welcome back. And to focus more on Africa, we are joined in the studio by Ambassador Mohammad Ashshazly, former ambassador to Sudan. Hello, sir, and welcome to our show.
Hello, morning.
Sir, how do you expect, of course, talking about Africa, Africa in 2016 has surprised the continent and surprised the whole world. The international community is shedding more light on Africa, heading towards Africa. And so how do you expect the economy, if we talk about the economy in Africa, how do you expect its economy in 2017?
Let me go back to something that you had in one of your reports, that Ivory Coast produces 40% of the world production of cocoa, which is the basic ingredient for chocolate. If you look in the supermarket, you'll find that chocolates are either Cadbury, British, Nestle, or...
We don't want to mention names.
Okay. But you will never find a brand of chocolate made in the Ivory Coast or made in Ghana, which is probably the second largest producer. This shows you that the Africans did not develop their economy. They remained as they were during the colonial era, producing primary commodities and not manufacturing these commodities into finished products and having a value added to their production. I think this is one of the main problems of the African economy. You will never find a developed country that relies on the production of one single primary product. If they have the primary product, they will manufacture it into a finished product, have the added value, and use their labor to fight unemployment. And this is how a country develops. So long as Africa is still, many of the African countries are depending on primary products, their economy will not launch.
Sir, the year 2017 was set as an indicative date for the completion of the negotiations for the continental free trade area. How are the African states proceeding with this area?
I think also this is another section that is in trouble. For instance, Egypt is part of the COMESA, which is supposedly a free trade area in the east and the south of Africa. If you look at the agreements, every country has many items exempted from free trade. So this handicaps the whole idea. If you want to prosper, manufacturing is one thing, and entering the market is another thing. There are lots of obstacles put in front of third world production in general, and maybe Africa in particular, to enter the European market, to enter the North American markets, to enter the Asian markets. If you look at, for instance, the United States, the strongest economy in the world, they found it imperative to have NAFTA, a North American free trade area, with Mexico and with Canada. And then you look at the African countries, you find that there are lots of obstacles for the free transport of material, taxation, customs, and in addition to that, the lack of the infrastructure, roads, railroads, shipping lines, which is essential for trade.
Okay, but when we look at the African continent, it's a virgin continent full of wealth and raw materials. That's why we find that China is saying that I'm going to invest in Africa, and they are investing in Africa, but they are taking the raw material and manufacturing in their country. The same goes with Israel, and the United States now is heading to Africa. This continent is very rich, but at the same time, people there cannot find food to eat. So how's that?
This is a paradox. This is part of the tragedy. You started by saying Africa is a virgin continent. You know, if you say about a 16-year-old girl, a virgin, this is a compliment. But if you say of a 60-year-old woman, she's a virgin, there's something wrong. I mean, Africa has been independent since the 60s. Why is it still a virgin? Why hasn't it drawn the investment? Why didn't they build their own capital to make them not dependent on foreign investment? Foreign investment is an important thing, but it's a handicap. If you allow foreign investment, that means that you're allowing somebody else to share your wealth. The United States does not depend on foreign investment. There is foreign investment, but the bulk of the economy is American. The Europeans, the same thing. The Japanese, the Chinese. Being hungry for foreign investment is a sign of the weakness of Africa. After nearly over 50 years of independence, we had at the beginning, you know, the blaming the colonial powers for depleting Africa of its resources, of sucking the Africans' blood, of exploiting Africa. But what have we done as Africans after 40 years? This is, you know, the crux of the problem. Otherwise, in 50 or 60 years' time, my grandchildren and your grandchildren will be still talking about Africa, the virgin continent, the importance of foreign investment, the importance of, and so on and so on.
But we heard that some African countries like Ethiopia, it's on the right path and its economy is starting to move ahead. South Africa as well. Some countries are starting to build a new vision about their economy. So is this true?
In the case of Ethiopia, I think it is politicized, and a positive spotlight is focused on Ethiopia for political reasons.
So it's not a real...
I don't think that... I mean, tell me what has Ethiopia achieved other than antagonizing Egypt?
Suddenly you found Ethiopia is a strong country supported by everybody.
Yes, it is politicized. The case of South Africa, I think, is a different case, and it's a very disturbing case. Because, you know, after the experiment of Nelson Mandela, there was Nelson Mandela, I mean, the hero of Africa, the man who transformed South Africa from one of the most brutal regimes into a country where coexistence is possible, where working together side by side to build the nation is possible. And I think this is an example that we have to cherish and we have to take care of it. Unfortunately, I found that there are cracks in the South African system now. There are lots of discontent people. There are lots of talk about corruption. There are lots of talks about misrule. And I hope that the South Africans will remedy this, because it will be a great pity to destroy, you know, this beautiful example that we have in Africa.
Sir, what about terrorism in Africa? Do you believe it's, I don't know, its power is growing or it's diminishing? How do you see terrorism so far in Africa?
I think, you know, terrorism is not a problem of Africa. The terrorism is a problem of the whole international community. You find terrorism everywhere. You find it in France. You find it in
But it's
in
based
Germany.
in Africa so far.
No.
Boko Haram, for example.
Boko Haram, but look at what has happened in Germany. Look at what has happened in France.
These are attacks, but the base is in here.
Yes. Why? And even, you can argue against this. Because, if you find where the terror is flaring up, you find that Europeans and Americans are part of the terror process. In Africa, in the Middle East, it is, I think, a result of poverty. It is the result of ignorance. It is a result of injustice, dictatorship, the result of media that is not aware of its duty, which foments, in a way, terrorism. That is why, if you look at countries that have a responsible media, a good educational system, justice, you look at the Scandinavian countries, for instance.
It will never be a source of terrorism. Ambassador Mohammad Ashshazly, former ambassador to Sudan, thank you very much for joining us, and welcome once again to Africa Today.
The pleasure is all mine.
Thank you. And by this we come to the end of our episode. I'm Dina Mamdouh. Thank you for watching.